everybody, how are you doing? It is Sunday night, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. Hope you had a great Cinco de Mayo, a great weekend. Actually, I forgot, I was just walking in downtown Boise about 30 minutes ago, and there was a bunch of dancers who were inside performing at a food hall type thing. And let me show you the picture that I took. It was oh, hold up. That's not what I took, but that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Let me exit this PowerPoint. One moment. That's okay. A lot of people are still tuning in. So it is Cinco de Mayo, and this was what I saw downtown. I was so tempted to go in and say hello. Look at all those pretty dresses. So much talent. They were dancing to different music in there, and a lot of people were stopped to watch. So I hope you had a good Cinco de Mayo. I did not eat any tacos. But my brother-in-law's birthday is, and I just have to give him a shout out. Rhett, I hope you're watching. They actually live in Utah, and they went up to see my wife and kids this weekend. I mean, they came up for a wedding reception, but they spent the weekend with my family, and I, of course, was not there. I stayed the weekend in Boise because there was a lot happening. I'll go through that in a minute. But tonight, if you're tuning in, this is what we're going to talk about. Key moments we've seen in the trial thus far. You know, we've been at this for over a month now. Jury selection started on the 1st of April, and it is now, tomorrow's the 6th of May, and we've technically only had 16 trial days. Tomorrow is day 17, so while it may seem like it's dragging, I guess it kind of is, but that's okay, you know, don't rush justice. We've been waiting years for this, and that's what we're having happen now. The trial is unfolding before our eyes. I didn't go home this weekend. I spent the weekend in Boise because it was the annual Idaho Press Club Awards. Every year, the journalists all get together from the state. We have a banquet, and awards are given out for different stories. And our team, I have to congratulate them all. We took home 12 awards. Here's a picture of my team. Yes, I am bragging here, and I'll admit it. We have some really talented people on our team. This is the, professional photo that I wanted to show you, but this is kind of really how we all are. And so excited to win these awards. And I work with a bunch of great people. Andrea and Kalama there on the right, they helped me out when I was in Boise when I was in Jamaica 2 or 3 weeks ago. Nate, who is next to me, he's our managing editor. He runs the newsroom. And when I'm away, he has to do a lot, but he does it with a great attitude and does a really good job. Jordan, on the other side of me, he's our photographer, so he shoots a lot of the video that you see with me in it. He shoots and he edits and he puts together stories. And then David just joined us. He's on the far screen left, and he's a very talented writer, and we have a really good team. And this isn't all of us. We have a bunch that stayed back in Idaho Falls. Here's another fun little photo. So I do want to take a minute and tell you that Courtroom Insider from last year, the Lori Vallow series, did take home an award for Media Innovation Award. And I'm just so honored by this because you all make this broadcast happen. I mean, I do this for you, and this we did on a whim last year. As like a week before the trial, I thought, how can I explain to people like what's happening in the courtroom, because there were no cameras at the time. And I thought, what if I do like a 10-minute breakdown show every night just telling you what happened? And that went from 10 minutes to 20 to 30 to an hour. And it turned into a success in our eyes. And I said, well, let's do it with Chad Daybell. And here we are. So thank you for that. I also won an award, Best Use of Social Media, for the Vallow tweets that I put out, the updates. So again, thank you all. I do want to shout out Jordan. I told you a minute ago, he won first place for best photography for the whole state for this photo, which I love. I love this picture. He and I were able to go to Washington, D.C. last year with a group of veterans who had never gone. And we documented, it was about 10 veterans, I think, maybe 12. And they got to go see all of the sites. Many had never been to the nation's capital before. They all served in different wars. We had a World War II vet with us, and it was quite a trip, just an incredible trip. And I remember it was like 3 weeks before Lori Vallow's trial, and I was a little worried to be going because I thought, oh, there's so much to do to get ready for the trial. I am so glad I went. I will never forget that trip. And anyway, Jordan caught this moment there at the wall where this Bill was this soldier's name. He found his friend's name. This was his first time to D.C., and he rubbed his finger over his friend's name there on the wall and took off his hat and kneeled down with his cane next to him and just looked at the name. And it was a very touching moment, and glad that Jordan snapped a photo because we have that for history, and we have the award now. He has the award. So there we go. That's what happened this weekend. I had some time to explore Meridian, which is a nice community. And I have to give a shout out to the kindest couple I met at a restaurant. I walked in and Donna and Ron were there celebrating their friend's birthday. And I forgot the name of the friend. I apologize. But the friend also watches every night. Donna came over to chat with me, and then Ron came over to chat with me. We had a great conversation. They followed the trial. They watch every night. I hope they're watching tonight. And then they went back to their table, and I ate my food, and they left. And then the server came over, and I gave her my credit card, and she said, oh, they bought your meal. So thank you, Donna and Ron. You left before I could thank you in person, but I really appreciate that. That was so kind, and there's just so many nice people that everywhere I go that are just so polite. So thank you for that. Okay, now that that's all out of the way, really good weekend. I hope you had a good weekend. Erica was not able to join me at the awards ceremony because of there was a lot. There's so much happening at home, and she couldn't make it out, but she said to tell you all hello. Here's what we're going to talk about tonight when it comes to the trial of Chad Daybell. What will happen tomorrow? Who is left to be called? 8 key moments from last week. I went through everything that happened last week. There was a lot that happened. There was a lot of witnesses, and I boiled it. I not boiled it down, but I picked out 8 key moments. These weren't the only key moments, but these are moments that I believe will leave an impact on the jury's mind. Like they'll be able to recall, maybe have changed their mind or at least solidify something in their mind, in my opinion. We'll remember, of course, Tammy, JJ, and Tylee, and we will answer your questions. And also, as I mentioned this weekend, being an eventful weekend, it was Tammy Daybell's birthday yesterday. So happy birthday to Tammy. And we wish her family, her siblings and parents all the best. Okay, so Friday in the trial, we led off with the FBI agent Schmidt on the stand. Sorry, not Schmidt, Steve Daniels. This is him from this is from Chad Daybell's preliminary hearing back in 2020. He was behind plexiglass, but this is the best photo that I could find of him that we have. So he is FBI agent Daniels, and here is what we know him for. He's a member of the FBI evidence response team. I believe on Friday I got it wrong. I said emergency recovery team. My bad. I was thinking of CERT, which is, anyway, I got my letters confused. He's a member of the evidence response team. He was the FBI supervisor when the police went to Chad Daybell's home on June 9th of 2020. He talked about the fire pit discoveries, the charm and necklace that were found there around the fire pit that belonged to Tylee, which I think is a memorable moment for the jury. And Rob Wood said that he had about 40 minutes left till he was done with questioning on Friday. Then the judge took a break and said, all right, we'll come back Monday. So tomorrow I'm expecting Agent Daniels will be back on the stand. Rob Wood will question him about 40 minutes. John Pryor will then cross. Then there'll be redirect, and maybe by the mid-morning break, the FBI agent will be done testifying. So that's just my prediction. Maybe it'll go all day. I doubt it will. But this is the guy that really talked about removing layers of soil bit by bit there at the fire pit. And they showed the autopsy photos, the graphic ones of Tylee, what was left of her. He talked about the bucket that was found with her flesh inside, the bone fragments, the skull, any sort of body parts. He went through that with the jury. And he did not touch yet on JJ. And I imagine that will be tomorrow. He'll go through what they discovered at JJ's burial site. Okay, there's what we have. Now, who has testified so far? What witnesses have been on the stand? As I mentioned, we're 16 trial days in, about a month in, but there's been days off and there's been jury selection for part of that time and opening statements and whatnot. Well, here's who we have had so far in the case. So far, 45 people have testified. That's actually quite a bit if you think about it in 16 days. Some of these witnesses are on the stand for maybe 10 minutes. Some are on the stand like Ray Hermosillo, it seems like 10 hours. But 45 so far have testified. To give you a frame of reference to Lori Vallow's trial, 59 testified in her trial. Also, if you think about Lori Vallow's trial, we had a verdict the Friday before Mother's Day, which, if we're comparing trials, would be this upcoming Friday. There's no way we will have a verdict this Friday. We won't even be in like the penalty phase by this Friday. Lori Vallow's trial, I guess, moved a lot quicker because she didn't really have a defense, and her attorneys would sometimes cross-examine witnesses, but a lot of times they really wouldn't, based on her wish, her desire, not necessarily theirs. So 45 witnesses have testified in this trial. Kaya Kamanu has been on the stand twice. You might recall he is the chief deputy for Madison County Sheriff's Office, but is the agent, the officer who's authorized to be in the courtroom the whole time. And he hasn't missed a day. Others could be called again. John Pryor has hinted that several of the law enforcement officers and other witnesses may be called again, and the prosecution could call some again. I believe they said Doug Hart, the FBI guy who went through all of the hard drives and iClouds, things like that, mainly the iCloud accounts. I imagine he will get called again. And then we have the defense. They have their own witnesses. Pryor has said he plans to call at least 3 expert witnesses. I believe one's a pathologist, one is a DNA expert. I forget the other one who he said. And then there's Chad's kids who he said will take the stand. So I think being conservative, he could probably call 6 people. And then the question with that is, does each of those witnesses stay on the stand for a day or a half a day? I don't know how quick that's going to move. He could also recall some of the prosecutor's witnesses. Then let's say Pryor calls all of his witnesses, the prosecution finishes their witnesses. If the jury comes back with a guilty verdict, we have another phase of the trial called the penalty phase, where witnesses will be back. They will call, and it'll be a lot more, I don't want to say emotional, but probably emotional. I mean, there will be people for Chad's side, probably his children, who will argue that he should not receive the death penalty. There will be people on the prosecutor's side who will argue he definitely needs to receive the death penalty. And that could go several days, up to 2 weeks. So there'll be witnesses in that phase. So there is a lot more time to this trial. Now, who could take the stand who hasn't? I went through my notebook with Lori Vallow's, and this is just my educated guesses, comparing like who was called in her trial who hasn't been called yet. And not all of those people will be called. Like, I don't think we're going to see Summer Shiflett maybe in this trial, but I doubt it. But we didn't have Heather Daybell in Lori's trial, and we did in this trial. So this is just some of the guesses. But the people that I believe we will hear from this trial: Zulema Pastenis, we have not heard from her yet. Samantha Gawillam, that's Tammy's sister. I think we could hear from her maybe this week. Jason Gawillam, her husband, who was really good friends with Chad, worked with Chad, stood up for Chad. The funeral director the other day who took the stand, when he suggested to Jason that maybe Chad did something right after Tammy died, Jason stood up for Chad and said, no, not Chad. Melanie and Ian Pulowski, we have not heard from them. Now, we heard from Ian on the last trial. Melanie came to town but ended up not testifying. Maybe they will get called. Their names sure have been brought up a lot in this trial, and we know that Ian Pulowski talked about the stuff that Melanie told him on their wedding night. And I'm going to pause here for a minute. If you have not watch the interview I did with Melanie and Ian back in May of 2020, you may want to. Obviously, things have changed quite a bit since then. The children had not been located at that time. Lori was in jail. Chad had not been arrested. But Ian told the police and testified to this that on their wedding night, Melanie and Ian's wedding night, she told him all about this dark and light and evil spirits and all this stuff. He got worried. He called his ex-wife. She said, go to the cops. He went to the cops. He wore a wire. He wore a wire to try to get information for the police out of Melanie or Lori or Chad or Alex about where the kids could be, about where the kids could be and other stuff in relation to the case. So he testified last year. If you want to go listen to that testimony, you can. And Melanie did not testify. But it's possible they could get called during this trial. Sheriff Ron Ball, who was one of the lead investigators when he was with Rexburg Police, he's now the sheriff of Madison County. He could be called to the stand in the next week or so. He was involved in all of this. We did not hear from him in the last trial. We could hear from him this year. And one of the FBI evidence analysts, we have not heard from Benjamin Dean. He also testified in Lori's trial. He also spoke at Chad Daybell's preliminary hearing in 2020. And he, I imagine we will hear from him. So those are, and one more, Audrey Baratario. Remember how Audrey was referenced the other day in text messages that Lori was texting her because Audrey knew about Chad's plan or thoughts, doctrines, teachings, whatever you want to call it. And Audrey was kind of big into this. She went with Lori to Hawaii with Melanie, and she testified at the last trial that Lori threatened to kill her, and that led to some fireworks in the courtroom because she apparently did not tell the grand jury that when they indicted, and she did not say it at another hearing, and she said it at the trial on redirect. So after she testified, the defense asked her questions. Then on redirect, she brought it up. And then Lori's attorney, Jim Archibald, stood up and was like, you expect us to believe this crap? His words. You expect us to believe this crap that Lori threatened you? Anyway, it would be interesting when if Audrey takes the stand, how John Pryor will handle her. So that's just my list of possible witnesses. Here it is. Zulema, Samantha, Jason, Melanie and Ian, Sheriff Ball, Benjamin Dean from the FBI, and Audrey Baratario. I think, though, there will definitely be more than this. As I said, we're up to 45. Last week we went through a lot. By this time next week, we could have another 20 on the list and be up to 65 witnesses. Wouldn't that be something? We'll have a better idea next week at this time about what's coming up next in the trial. You know, if the prosecutors have kind of laid out their case, how much longer they'll have. I kind of made a guess and told people, I think it'll be done by Memorial Day. I don't think that's the case anymore. Maybe, but I don't think so. Okay, there's kind of a focus on what's happening going forward. I do want to talk about 8 key moments. Why 8? Well, I started with 5 and I couldn't stop, and I figured let's just do 8. 8, Nate. I used to work at Channel 8 in Richmond, Virginia, so it was really easy for people to remember my name. I'd call and say, hey, it's Nate with 8. Anyway, and my Twitter was N8, Nate. There you go. Okay, 8 key moments from the past week. Let's go through them all. I want to know, by the way, in the comments, tell me what you think some key moments were. And I've been talking about maybe having you guys, some of you call in. I'm thinking about how we could logistically do this because I'm not going to announce my cell phone number, but I think we can set up a hotline where every night you all could call in during Courtroom Insider and I could play some of your comments. So let me think that through. Let me know your thoughts on if we did do that, because I'd love to actually hear from you about your thoughts. Here is key moment number 1. Let me take a drink. We learned early on this last week that lots of calls were made between Alex, Chad, and Lori on key dates in key places. Not only calls, but text messages. So what do I mean by key dates and places? Well, in Rexburg, around Lori's apartment, and around Chad Daybell's property, the dates on the day that the children died or were last seen alive. We learned this from FBI cast member Nick Balance. He went through all of this on as he was on the stand. And it's such a technical testimony. You can go back and watch it all. I pulled just a little clip to give you a flavor of what this was like and what the testimony held. So here's just a little clip of what he said when I talk about key dates, key times, key people, what they were doing around these times.
So this specifically is looking at September 9th from 7:20 in the morning until 8:04 in the morning. The tower at the top is associated with the 0143 phone, which was associated with Chad Daybell. That's utilizing a tower and sector that provides coverage to the Chad Daybell residence. And then there are multiple text messages and then a call at 8:03. And then, as I mentioned before, Verizon does not record the location information for text messaging. So because of that, we can see that the text messages are being exchanged with the Lori Vallow 4652 phone, but we don't see the tower and sector that her phone utilized in those text messages. We do, however, see on the phone call that occurs at 8:03 from the Daybell 4652 phone from the Daybell 0143 phone to the Lori Vallow 4652 phone, we see that the Lori Vallow phone is utilizing a tower and sector that provides coverage to her residence.
And what was the date and time frame for these conversations?
Yeah, so the text messages were 7:20 in the morning, 7:42, 7:53, 8 o'clock, and then 8:03. And then the phone call is from the Daybell 0143 to the Vallow 4652 phone at 8:03.
Okay, so you can say it's a coincidence, I guess. They might argue that. Of course, Chad Daybell's phone's going to be actively involved. And John Pryor has admitted several times that, yes, Chad Daybell was having an affair with Lori Vallow and that there's nothing illegal about that. But when you have Alex Cox, his device at Chad Daybell's property, and the only times they're at Chad Daybell's property are during these key dates, and they pick up around the fire pit and they pick up around the tree where JJ was buried, that's problematic for the defense. Although they could say that was Alex. It would be fascinating if Alex was still alive, if there would be a third trial, or if he would have been tried with some of these. He obviously would have been indicted and facing the death penalty, as these guys are, but would it have been severed? I mean, that just is crazy to think about. And he likely would face charges in Arizona too, like Lori. Okay, so that was that I think is critical, that while the jury may not remember all of the data points and all of the times and places and all of that, they will, I would imagine, remember that there was a lot of activity, and if only they could retrieve those texts and calls, if they had recordings of like what Chad was saying to Lori during that time and what Alex was saying to them, and a lot of activity around those times. Okay, the next key moment that I thought was interesting this past week: conflicting stories at the funeral. I'm talking about Tammy Daybell's funeral, and this was testimony from Hannah Munoz and Patricia Later. Patty is Tammy's cousin. They were very, very close. They taught school together at the same school. They were raised together. They joined, I believe, the band together. And Hannah got up and she testified about her encounter at the viewing for Tammy Daybell. That when she spoke with Chad, she was a little confused, not only by the way he was acting, wasn't very emotional, wasn't grieving, just kind of acting a little different, but also the stories he told and the conflicting stories he told within a matter of hours. Here was her testimony, part of her testimony.
Can you explain to the jury what you first remember him saying about anything?
Yeah, he said that Tammy had been sick that day. He said that she had been vomiting and coughing. And then around 10 p.m., she had vomited again and then came to his office and said that she was feeling a little bit better. And he said that she was going to bed and that he stayed in his office working. And then around 1 a.m., he went upstairs and found Tammy on the floor. And he said that she had rolled out of the bed and was on the floor, and that he found her cold and already passed.
So that was a lot of information. Just for clarity, I'm going to ask some follow-up. So when you said he described this, was he talking about the night that she passed?
Yes.
Okay. I think you said that she came to him at 10 o'clock. Is that right?
Yes.
What time do you remember, if at all, that he said that Tammy went to bed that night?
He said Tammy went to bed around 10.
And what time was it that you said he finally went to bed himself?
Around 1 a.m.
And when was it that he said that he found Tammy on the floor, passed away?
Around 1 a.m.
So is there any question in your mind that that's precisely what he said?
No.
During that interaction with him, did you observe anything about his tone or demeanor?
Yes.
What did you notice?
I noticed that he seemed calmer than I would have expected, and that he would get emotional only when my dad would get emotional, and then would stop, like once my dad stopped crying.
Why did that stand out to you?
It stood out to me because I would have expected someone who just lost their partner to be a little more distraught. And he seemed calmer than I would have expected him to be.
And in fact, are you married?
Yes.
Okay. Now, later that evening, you said, I think earlier, that you'd also went through the line with your mother.
Yes.
About how long after the time you went through with your dad did you also go through the line with your mother?
About 2 hours.
Could you please just explain to the jury your experience when you went through the line with your mother?
Yes. So they were talking, and Chad was telling us what happened. And he said that she had been coughing that day, and that she'd been coughing pretty violently. So he was worried about her. Between 9 and 10, she came down to his office and said that she was going to rest and go to bed. He said that he was worried about her, so he went to bed at the same time. And then at around midnight, he woke up to her rolling out of bed and hitting the floor. He said that he went to check on her and had found that she had passed.
What was your immediate reaction when you heard that account of things?
I was confused at first.
Why?
Because it was inconsistent with what I had heard earlier that evening.
And she went on to say that she went home and talked with her mom about it that night and talked to her aunt, Samantha, about it. And this was the same witness that John Pryor went up, and we won't go into this tonight because we've covered it a lot this past week about the stairs. The fact that in part of that story, Tammy went downstairs to talk to Chad, and Chad went upstairs, and how Pryor got up and said, "Are you aware this is a one-story home?" And she said, "I've never been to the house," and put that seed of doubt into the juror's mind that how could they go up and down if it's one story? Well, several witnesses then testified that there was an add-on to the house. There was like a loft, and the prosecution actually showed photos of the stairs. So I think that issue has been put to bed, but maybe they'll keep drilling it home that there was an upstairs and a downstairs. They actually showed photos taken from that upstairs window overlooking the property from then on out. So that was another key moment. Now here's the third key moment that I thought. The medical examiner, Dr. Eric Christensen. Now this is the guy that did the autopsy on Tammy. Oh, you know what? We haven't, I think we'll hear more, side note, from the other doctor, the autopsy Emmy in Idaho. We haven't heard from him. That's another witness I think we could hear from that testified at the last trial. Dr. Eric Christensen was confident in these two facts. One, that Tammy died of asphyxia. Her cause of death was asphyxia, and the manner of death was homicide. He did not back down from those determinations, even with prior questioning him. He was pretty set on those key facts. And when Lindsay Blake questioned him, he made that determination. He pointed out the bruises that were on Tammy's bodies, on her arm, on her upper chest. And then John Pryor got up and, tried to poke holes in the theories. And then after Lindsay Blake got up on redirect, and this is some of what she said.
In the medical reports you reviewed, you didn't see any sign of low blood pressure.
I did not.
In the medical records you reviewed, did you see any signs of seizures?
No.
In the medical reports you reviewed, did you see any indication that Tammy had had a prior history of any negative drug interactions between her prescription medication and herbal remedies?
No.
And counsel asked you about the bruises on Tammy and them being labeled as not specific. Do you
Yes.
recall that?
Yes.
You indicated that sometimes you are able to form an opinion as to how those may have been inflicted. Is that correct?
I can answer hypotheticals about how they may have been inflicted. Yes.
And based on your training and experience, where those bruises were located, could they be consistent with someone being restrained?
They could be. Yes.
And you were asked a lot about those pictures and if someone was holding Tammy down and then suffocating her. Do you recall that line of questioning?
Yes. Yes.
Where the bruises were located, would it be possible for someone to have been restraining her while someone else suffocated her?
It's possible.
Consistent in his answers. And I think the jury's going to remember that. Another key moment. Chad had a vision of Tammy's death, and he used his beliefs to try and get money, bond money, from the neighbors, the Gilberts, Alice and Todd. They testified and provided some interesting insight. And here's part of what Todd said about his encounter with Chad a couple of times during 2019, before Tammy died and then after she died.
To talk with Chad about how his kids felt about Lori?
Yes, when we would see him, he would already kind of bring it up himself that they were fine with Lori, that Tammy had appeared to him in spirit, I don't know, at least twice, and said that she was doing fine and that she understood the plan, that she was going to move on in the spirit world, and then that Chad's mission was to be married to Lori, and that his children were basically becoming fine with that thing, which seemed odd to us, but.
And he specifically indicated Tammy had come to him in a vision or something,
Yes,
and she'd indicated she was fine with everything.
yes.
After that visit around Thanksgiving, did Chad ever, or I think it was a little before Thanksgiving, did Chad ever return to your residence at a later time?
I can't say for sure, but it seems like it. There was about 3 different times.
And I think you said that your understanding was Chad and Lori's plan was to eventually move to Hawaii permanently.
Yes.
Did some additional visits happen before they moved?
Not that I can recall. The last time we seen him was before Thanksgiving.
And after they'd moved, at some point, did Chad end up coming to your residence?
Yes, he came to our residence after Lori was brought back to Rexburg and after he got back into the area.
And do you recall why Chad came to your residence?
Yes, I remember that when he walked in the door, he says that the Christ had sent me here to ask you guys if you would be willing to put your home up for bond to get Tammy out of jail. Not Tammy, excuse me, Lori out of jail.
So that's just one of the encounters. He also testified, I talked about the visions that he said he had. He went to the Gilberts in February after he had met Lori the previous fall and said, I've had a vision, a premonition that Tammy's time is almost done, that she's going to die before her 50th birthday. And then February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, 8 months later, she died. I think that that's going to be a moment that those jurors don't forget. So we talked about the testimony of Alice and Todd. One of the lines I remember was Alice saying, and I remember she said this in Lori's trial too, because that was a year ago, and I remember that. She said to Chad, didn't Tylee deserve to get a boyfriend, to get a job, to raise a child, to have a life? And Chad said, well, she never liked me, past tense anyway. This is when the kids were still missing and no one knew that they were dead. Okay, another moment. Wedding searches while Tammy was still alive. You know, searches for the rings, for the dresses in early October, around the time Brandon's getting shot at, around the time that Tammy's still alive, around the time that Lori is getting impatient with Chad. She decided to do some Googling on Amazon on Charles's account and charge his card, even though he's been dead. And thank goodness that Kay Woodcock found it and was able to talk about it. And she took the stand. This is from Kay's testimony, and this is her describing what she found.
What did you see?
Jaw dropping. I saw a search for malachite wedding rings. There was one purchased actually for $35 or $36.99. I saw searches for women's beach wedding dresses. I saw that she looked at or maybe purchased two, I don't remember, a yellow bikini, not a bikini, a yellow one-piece bathing suit. And another search was men's beach clothes, men's for like linen beach clothes, and a size large is what she was looking at. And it was a white shirt and white pants that like you would wear on a beach, you know, linen type clothes.
Okay.
And that
Do you
search,
recall what date that search was performed?
that search was performed, I was just about to say that, October the 2nd of 2019. I read that November the 8th, but the search was actually done on October 2nd, 2019. And that was that was before Tammy's death.
All right.
I remember in February of 2020, I was in New York City to record a show with Dr. Oz, and Kay and Larry were there too. And before the show, we were in, I was in their dressing room and we were chatting. And I knew the Woodcocks a little bit because of the story, but not like we know each other now. And I remember saying to them, have you heard anything about this like Amazon search? Because I had heard, I don't know who I had heard from. I had heard something, and Kay said, yeah, just wait. And then I said, have you heard anything about this dark and light list? And she's like, yeah, just wait. And sure enough, I waited, and wow, a lot came out. It's wild to go back and watch some of those interviews from the early days to see how far we've come. But, you know, hey, people are going to remember, I think the jurors are going to remember that Lori's searching for white linen clothes, malachite rings, a beach dress, and lo and behold, we see the beach photos of the wedding and close-ups of the rings and the linen outfits. Okay, a couple more key moments that I believe. Chad Daybell, this one just blows my mind. And I don't know why. I mean, it shouldn't, but he didn't tell his parents he was getting remarried, until after he and Lori had tied the knot. And it was just a casual mention at the Texas Roadhouse with those yummy rolls that he tells Sheila and Jack, by the way, we're married. This is what his mom said on the stand.
Did you learn that Chad Daybell had moved out of the residence that he had shared with Tammy?
Yes,
Do you remember approximately when you learned that?
I don't remember a certain date.
Okay. Could you estimate approximately how many weeks after Tammy's death that happened?
Oh, maybe 2 to 3 weeks.
Were you surprised to find out that Chad had moved out of the residence?
Yeah.
I want to talk to you specifically about the middle of November of 2019. Did you and Jack travel to Idaho?
We did.
Did you meet with Chad at a Texas Roadhouse
Yes.
in Idaho Falls?
Yes.
Was it dinner time, lunchtime?
Dinner time.
Okay. Now you and Jack met Chad at the Texas Roadhouse. Was somebody else there?
Yes.
Who was that?
Lori Vallow.
Had you ever met Lori Vallow before?
No.
During that dinner, did Chad tell you and Jack anything about his relationship with Lori Vallow?
I don't think he did as much as Lori did.
Okay. What did Lori tell you?
Well, she just, we noticed that they had these rings on, and my husband said, "Are you engaged?" And they said, "No, we're married."
Were you surprised?
Yeah.
Did they tell you when they had gotten married?
No.
Now, on November 13th of 2019, this was approximately a month after Tammy's death.
Mm-hmm.
Is that why you were surprised?
Yeah, I was.
Okay. Did Chad or Lori tell you anything about whether or not Lori had been married before?
Chad didn't.
Did Lori?
Yes.
What did Lori tell you?
Oh, that she'd been married before?
Yes.
Well, she just said that her husband had recently died,
Did she say how he had died?
heart attack.
When Lori said that her husband had died of a heart attack, what did Chad say, if anything?
I don't remember any specific mention.
Okay.
His own mom didn't know. Then we went from his mom, Sheila, to his sister-in-law, Heather Daybell. If you haven't listened to that testimony, you should. That, I think, is a key witness. Out of all these key moments, that's one that will stick out. This is like the sister-in-law that was concerned because Chad, for some time, had been having these visions, or telling her and others that he was having these visions, that he moved to Rexburg because he had had a vision and had these prophecies that the second coming was coming, and that everyone would gather in Rexburg. She confronted Chad after he married Lori, and he wasn't happy. Heather actually reached out to his children because she had heard that Chad remarried, and they were not happy, according to her. And this is what the encounter went like with him.
Reached out in a group text, had gotten remarried, and that his children were struggling and upset. So I reached out in a group text to his children and let them know that I was there for them if they needed me, that they were upset. And that resulted in Chad calling me.
And please explain to the jury how the conversation went between you and Chad at that point.
I answered, he said, "This is Chad." And he was upset with me and told me I had been a problem for him his whole life. And I asked him, who is this person you've married? And he explained her name was Lori. Would I like to meet her? And I said, no, I would not. And then I asked him what happened to Tammy. And he said she died of a pulmonary embolism because she had gained 40 pounds.
Now, earlier you've testified that you were seeing Tammy at least in church every week.
Yes.
Had you observed a 40-pound weight gain in Tammy?
I don't generally keep track of people's weight gain or loss, but I had not noticed a big increase in weight gain on Tammy, no.
How did you react to that when he gave that explanation?
I remember being so flustered by that explanation because he had given me a different one weeks before that I was just upset, and he indicated to me, I'm going to be living in Hawaii, so you don't have to worry about me anymore. And that was the end of the conversation.
Did you challenge him on the different explanations in that phone call?
I don't remember challenging him because I was so shocked by that I didn't challenge him on that.
Besides the different explanations as to Tammy's death, was there anything else that was shocking you in that conversation?
Just expressing to him, how can you get married this quickly after your wife has just passed away?
Did he give an answer to that?
He said that he'd met her about a year before, so he'd known her, and that she had lost a husband to a heart attack. And it just was, they were there for each other, and it just worked out that they'd get married.
You mentioned that one of the first things he said in the phone call was to the effect of, you've been a problem for me my whole life.
Yes.
What did you take that to mean?
I said to him, your whole life? I didn't understand what I had done to him his whole life, that he would consider me a problem.
Did he explain?
No.
Again, go listen to her testimony, the entire thing, if you haven't heard it. It's pretty memorable. And then, final key moment from the past week. Again, there's so many moments I could have picked, but these are just kind of the key ones. The wedding photos. I mentioned those a minute ago, but the wedding photos and police body camera footage that was shown to the jury. The police body camera footage we're talking about was the initial visit to Lori's apartment when she actually answered and said JJ's with Melanie Gibb, and the search warrant the next day when the apartments were just abandoned, empty, other than, well, I shouldn't say empty of humans, empty of people. And the closet was empty where she kept all her clothes. But other than that, there was a lot of stuff left behind. I was going to play you some of that, but if you want to watch it, head over to our YouTube channel because we've got that there. We've got Heather Daybell's testimony on there as well as the rest of the testimony. And this next week should be pretty fascinating. Jurors have been attentive. They've been taking notes. They have been focused on the witnesses. They sit directly across from Chad. I have noticed a few of them looking directly at him. He kind of looks at them, but kind of doesn't. Some of these clips you'll notice, especially when the cousin was on the stand, Patty, and her daughter Hannah, he was leaning over and whispering to John Pryor, in his ear. Like, you could tell that testimony was really kind of hitting him, probably in a way that he didn't really like. But anyway, those are the key moments from that I want to talk about tonight. And I want to remember Tammy Daybell tonight, along with JJ and Tylee. This is a picture that Tammy Daybell's relative sent me. Let me try to find it. Okay, I don't have it here. Peggy, let me go into my email, and I will find it for you. This is a picture when they were... Here we go. Hi, Nate. This is Tammy's uncle. Our reporting is close and doesn't like a lot of attention. We get that from our mother, Lucille Cooper. I imagine that's Grandma Cooper. This is a picture of me next to Tammy, smiling with rabbit ears. I'm putting behind her head. She is in the middle, laughing her head off. In the picture from left to right is Michael, brother to Tammy, Samantha, sister to Tammy, Phyllis, who passed away in June, Tammy's mom, and mine and Vicky's sister. You can share this if you'd like. Phyllis, my sister, lived in Anaheim, and at 9 o'clock at night, we could go outside and watch the Disneyland fireworks show. Tammy, we know, loved Disney and loved going there with her siblings, and her siblings loved Disney. And this is a nice photo, I thought, of young Tammy. And speaking of young, I did want to share this. This is a picture I took last week at the memorial for JJ and Tylee. There's JJ's M&M jacket. If you can see in this photo, I don't know if you can, right behind, I'll have to get a close-up, JJ's wearing that M&M jacket. And Larry Woodcock has said multiple times how much JJ loves M&Ms. So wanted to share that with you tonight. And then we have a lot of questions. So I'm going to buzz through these, try to get to as many as we can. Again, a big shout out to Donna and Ron, who I met today and bought me lunch. Here we go. Jennifer Bishop, thank you for watching. Tony Miller, Yvonne Shuey, Charles Canchola, Judy Nickers, Barb Henry, Cindy Barney, Doris Adams, Debbie McLean. Your father-in-law and 4 uncles served in World War II. God bless them all. Thank you. Sydney Calhoun, Antoinette Kilpatrick, Diana Franklin, Paula Larson, Dawn Ray, and Melissa Daniels. Thank you all very much. We've got to start getting some men on these lists. So guys, if you're watching, comment. I know guys watch, but I know the majority of you are female. So I appreciate, no matter who you are, what you are, I appreciate you watching. So many of you have sent me cute pictures of your pets watching the TV. I guess they get a kick out of this. I don't know. Okay, question number 1. I hear, Nate, that you are talking to Summer Shiflett, Lori's sister, at CrimeCon. I would like some more details. They don't celebrate serial killers, do they? They definitely do not. And Summer is, I am interviewing her at CrimeCon. And actually, that's not the only thing I'm doing. CrimeCon is a true crime convention, you could say, where there's a lot of cool things. But I'm going to show you, just give you an idea of what CrimeCon is, okay? For those of you that are curious about it. It's coming up the end of the month. This is me. I'm doing the one with Summer, but I'm also doing this. Have you heard Scamanda, the podcast? Well, I will be talking with Go Behind the Scenes of the hit podcast Scamanda with executive producer and investigative journalist Nancy and former special agent with the IRS Arlette. The series, with over 40 million downloads, takes a look at Amanda Riley, a blogger who faked a cancer diagnosis and used it to raise over $100,000 in donations for supported treatment. They exposed the lies, and the woman, Amanda, was sentenced to 60 months in prison on federal fraud charges. Only at CrimeCon you'll hear how they developed the case against Riley and go behind the scenes to see the photos and videos from Scamanda's lung cancer con. So it's stuff like that. Like, I'm going to be talking with the Scamanda people. If you've listened to the podcast, if you haven't, and you love true crime, binge it. It's pretty good. There's like the Colonial Park murders, the past, the present, the future, Finding a Voice, victim impact statement readings, A Bug's Life of Crime, Sextortion, the hidden epidemic you need to know about, Surviving a Serial Killer with Candace DeLong, Don't Be Fooled Again, a lesson in detection with the Behavior Panel, A Daughter's Path to Navigating the True Crime World. I mean, there's all these things. Nancy Grace will be there, Serial Killer Interrupted. And then on Saturday, I will be speaking with John Ramsey will be there, by the way. That's, JonBenet Ramsey's dad. He's going to be speaking. And when I will be speaking, let me see where I'm speaking with Summer. It's sometime on Saturday. Oh, shoot. Somewhere in there. Oh, here we go. 4:20 on Saturday. Ties That Bind. When a family nightmare turns into a horrific reality. Summer Shiflet's world came crashing down in 2019. Anyway, it reads all about that. Meanwhile, the Chad Daybell trial is underway in Idaho with new news and revelations coming out seemingly every day. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about the jailhouse phone call. And then I'm doing one more thing, which should be fun for those of you into courtroom stuff. Sketch and Sip. I'll be moderating with Bill Robles, who is a world-renowned court artist. He's one of those sketch artists, and he is going to, everyone that comes to this will sketch their own court artist. He's going to teach everybody how to do it. I'll be hosting it. Each attendee will be provided with the supplies required to follow Bill's lead in creating your very own black and white courtroom sketch masterpiece and hearing lots of amazing stories along the way. Okay, enough about CrimeCon. That's what it is. I hope that gives you another flavor. If you want to go, you can use the promo code EATON, EATON, and get 10% off a standard badge. I don't make any money from this. I've been invited to go. This is my 4th year going, I believe. Erica is coming with me, my wife. Hope to meet many of you there. It's in Nashville. Don't know where it is yet in 2025, but if you can't make it this year, next year, I'll probably be back. Okay? Long answer to a short question. Thank you for asking. I talked about the awards. I'm the president of the Law Association at my university. Do you ever do public speaking events about your career and trials you've covered? This is from Rebecca at Minnesota. Do you charge a speaker fee? Could you come and speak when the trial's over? Oh, thank you, Rebecca. I would love to come and speak. I don't charge a speaker fee, but I could maybe come. Send me an email. That's the best thing I could do. I have spoken at a few events in Utah about the case and in Idaho, of course. But I'm happy to go as long as my travel's covered and as long as I have the time off from work. That can be the tricky thing, finding some time in my schedule. But if you send me an email, Rebecca, we can talk it out. Who's paying for Mr. Pryor if Chad's out of money? Does the state? Nope, the state's not paying. Chad is out of money, but John Pryor also got an advance, I would imagine, up front. He also owns the Daybell home. So he'll make money from that if he sells it, or the renters that are in there are paying him. But as of now, he's not able to bill Chad for more time because he said Chad is basically indigent. He doesn't have any money. With Lori Vallow, her attorneys at the end of the trial, they tabulated up all their charges, tabulated up all their hotel fees, their food fees, all of that. They were able to submit it because they were public defenders and get reimbursed. Not John Pryor. He's not getting anything from the state. Had Chad gone with a public defender in the beginning, he could have had that option, but he didn't. Tanya says, could you share more about the charges? The other day you mentioned Chad has to be found guilty of all the charges. Does that mean if he's not guilty of all, then he's acquitted of all the charges and can never be tried again? Kind of like the O.J. Simpson trial? Please explain more. He does not have to be convicted, Tanya, on all of the charges. He could be convicted of some and not on the others. Here's a graphic showing all of his charges. He's got 3 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of conspiracy, grand theft, and insurance fraud. He could be found guilty of first-degree murder for Tammy and JJ, but not Tylee. Or conspiracy, but not murder. He can be found guilty of all or none or some. But if he's found not guilty on some of them, he cannot be charged again. You can't, it's done. After this trial, it's over. So, that's what I meant, that there could be, it's possible the jury comes back with maybe he didn't commit Tammy's murder, but he committed the kids. So I hope that makes sense. The jury will be given very specific instruction, and they'll be given a sheet to fill out. And that's where they will mark the guilty or the not guilty on each of the charges. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Nate, can you tell us the layout of the courtroom? Is Chad beside the prosecution? It's driving me mad because I can't figure it out. That's from Marie in the UK. Marie, I am going to, one of the very first days I did a little diagram, and I want to find it and show you. He is not next to the prosecution. They moved the courtroom around. During jury selection, he was. But shoot, let me see if I can find, you know what, how about I get back to you tomorrow on that? Peggy, send me a reminder, please, on my email to talk about that, and I'll show the graphic tomorrow of the layout of the courtroom. Donna asks if Lindsay Blake has a cold. I noticed yesterday she sounded kind of stuffy, and today she was wiping her nose. I think she did. I think she had a little bit of a cold. It seemed like all of us in the courtroom last week, not all of us, most of us had a little bit of a something. I'm much better now. And Lindsay, hopefully she's much better. But yeah, and there was a chance that there wasn't a chance. One of the jurors did get sick and was dismissed. And the next question, any chance you can interview the sick juror to get his input on the trial up until when he was dismissed? The judge said that there was going to be instructions for that juror, but we don't know what those are. And at the risk of not getting in trouble, I won't approach that juror until the case is over. However, if the juror is watching or you know that juror and they were given the okay to talk, feel free to message me. But I probably think that they've got to keep quiet. Maybe not. So Carla says so many of the detectives, police, and FBI who have worked on the Daybell investigation have switched careers. I wonder if the investigation was so horrific they had to switch vocations for their own peace of mind. Have you interviewed any of them to ask what spurred their career changes? Good question, Carla. None of them have been interviewed about the case. The prosecutors asked them all to stay quiet until after the verdicts. But I've spoken with many of them, and a lot of them were ready for retirement, and the time came for them to retire. And that's what's happening. They're older investigators, and everyone I've talked to says it has affected them mentally more than you can imagine. And I don't know how it could not. Every single one. And I'm sure if the chance to retire came up, they would jump at it. Some got other jobs that were less intensive. Sheriff Ron Ball decided to run for sheriff and leave the police department to lead the sheriff's office. He brought over Kaya Kamanu from the other sheriff's office. I think these changes would have happened regardless, but I'm sure that this has had a toll on them. I mean, I haven't done a fraction of what these guys have done, but I always tell my wife, when this is all over, I think I'm just going to go sell cookies or do something that makes everybody happy and then not think about it. She said, yeah, you do that for a day and you would miss news. She's right. Kim, every day at the beginning, Judge Boyce thanks the jurors for their signed affirmations and continued services on this trial. What are the affirmations they sign every day? They sign and commit that they haven't done any research on the trial, that they haven't watched any media on the trial, that they haven't spoken with people about the trial, that they have not been influenced by outside forces when it comes to the trial. Also, does it seem that Mr. Pryor gets very annoyed and it comes through at the witnesses? I've had a lot of people say that. Seems like he does get annoyed if they're not answering questions the way he wants, or he expects them to answer a certain way, I guess you could say. That might just be how he is, his defense strategy, but I think that you make a possible argument there. Anna says, Nate, was a plea deal offered to Chad, and could he still take it? I have heard that there was mediation efforts a couple of times, several times maybe, and Chad would not take it because he would, I won't get into detail, but he just would not take the pleas. And so that's why we're here. I guess if tomorrow he said, okay, I want a plea to all of them and right now and give me life in prison instead of the death penalty, I'm sure the prosecutor would take him up on that. I don't know, but I'm sure, because that's a big, trial's over, cost-saving measure, all of that. And the appeals, if you plead guilty, the appeal process is far less intensive than if you're found guilty. And maybe you could get it in a plea agreement that, okay, you're pleading guilty, but you don't get to appeal or something like that. I don't think Chad's going to do that at this point. That'd be wild, though. Pam says, watching the trial, Chad seems to change his demeanor with different witnesses. With some witnesses like Kay, he's very fidgety, writing notes on his computer, getting a drink, rearranging items. With Melanie and Heather, he sits like a statue with his hands folded and staring right at them. Do you think he's trying to intimidate them? Perhaps. I will say Lori was far more engaged with the witnesses. She would have visual responses, especially to the ones she knew, versus like the law enforcement. I don't know if he is trying to intimidate them. I don't think it's working. I don't think you're going to intimidate Kay Woodcock or Heather Daybell. I just don't see it. And honestly, Chad is not a real intimidating person. He's just not. His attorney has said that over and over and asked, he's kind of a quiet guy, introverted. You've heard him speak. I mean, that is not someone in those recordings of someone speaking with great, authority and which is, again, amazing to me that so many people would go hear him speak, because he was, from everything I've seen, he wasn't the most dynamic type of speaker. Anne says, maybe I missed this, but I keep waiting for a witness to read into the record Chad's text to Tammy about burying the raccoon in the backyard. Did this happen already? I keep waiting for them to show the storage unit videos. Has this yet to happen? The raccoon text, I think it's been mentioned. I don't know if they've actually read it yet, but if they haven't, they will. The storage unit videos have not come into play yet. They did not at the last trial either. I asked why, and I was told because it wasn't, well, one, they likely didn't need it 100% of the time. They didn't need it to make a difference. And we in the media were able to get those videos, and we're able to enhance it and zoom in and show you everything. And in court, you really can't do that. You can't modify the videos. Unless you get an expert. Anyway, it could be quite complicated, but maybe it'll come in on this trial. I don't know. Marley says, would you consider doing an interview with John Pryor after the case concludes? I am feeling awful for him, having the full load of work and the immense responsibility of Chad's life hanging over him. Doesn't mean I like him or approve of his method in court. I just have empathy for the guy. That's nice of you, Marley. He is doing this solo, and I cannot imagine the fatigue factor. You've got to always be on. You've got to know what's coming up the next day. You've got to prepare for your own defense case. So yeah, I mean, he is doing a lot. I mean, the other argument is, could he have brought on co-counsel? I'm not sure. I would love to interview him. I want to interview him. I want to interview the prosecutors. I want to interview the court reporter that has to type it all out. I want to interview anyone that'll talk, and I'll have an open invitation, and we'll do Courtroom Insider the night of those interviews, and we'll play them for you. But yes, I'd love to talk to John Pryor. I'm writing in hopes you can address Melanie's niece, Lori's niece, Melanie. This is from Gina. Why is she never brought up? And we don't hear anything from her? It seems she definitely was involved in some way, or at least has information to share. It's driving me crazy. Did I miss something? Gina, she has been brought up during the trial. I have heard it, maybe not a ton. I don't know if she's going to testify. A lot of people think she knows more. She was never charged and hasn't been charged. And I don't know what more to tell you. Maybe we'll hear from her on the stand, maybe this week. Elizabeth says, if the jury cannot decide on whether Chad gets the death penalty, do you know if there are specific markers or points the prosecution must prove in order to ensure its death penalty? The prosecution has to prove that there were aggravating factors. Not only was there a murder, there was a vicious murder. Not only was one person murdered, there was more than one person murdered. If it was a police officer, that would be an aggravating factor. Idaho law lays out the aggravating factors for death penalty qualified cases. If the jury can't agree, if there's one person out of the 12 that does not want death, they don't go with death. Chad gets life in prison. Everyone has to completely 100% agree that it's death, or it doesn't happen. And so what the prosecutors will do all along, they're presenting their case. John Pryor will present the defense. The jury will come back with a verdict. If they then say guilty of first-degree murder, of all the first-degree murders, then the prosecution will lay out their case as to why he should get death. That's when we'll see out all the aggravating factors, and witnesses will testify why Chad Daybell should be put to death. Since the ME stated the cause of death was asphyxia, is there any evidence or information out there that would estimate how Chad caused the death, meaning with his hand over her mouth or nose or a pillow, and that it was Chad that did it? That has not come up yet as far as who did it. And it did not come up in Lori's case. It wasn't like we have proof that Chad Daybell was in the house smothering Tammy with a pillow. We didn't hear any of that. Could happen in this case. I don't know if it will. It could. We have not heard that, though. Personal question. Do you have any updates on your very beautiful daughter's very bright future in journalism? Do you foresee this being a passion of hers that she will pursue? And is there any news about her future interviews and whom she's interviewing? Well, that's a nice question. For those of you wondering what in the world we're talking about, my daughter does a weekly segment called 7 Questions with Emmy. She started when she was 7. She's now 10. She's interviewed over 250 people, including Michael Bublé and Keith Morrison and Drew Barrymore, and I can't. The list of celebrities is long. I will tell you, she's interviewed Rachel Platten. That she talked to her a couple days ago. She's the singer of Fight Song and Stand By You, and she was so amazingly wonderful. She was great. She invited Emmy to come out to her concert and introduce her on stage. So that one's coming up. There are a couple of others we're working to secure. Emmy has always been very curious and very genuinely interested in people. If you have the chance to meet her, she wants you to be her best friend, and she truly, genuinely listens and, is able to pick up on things. And I say this as a very proud dad, yes, but I would not be surprised if she went into news or interviews or something, because she's like that. And that would make me so happy. I've always said when it's time for me to retire at East Idaho News, she can take over. She can do Secret Santa, and she can do Courtroom Insider. Nate and Emmy, passing the baton. Okay. Kathleen, why aren't the prosecution witnesses testifying about the same or similar evidence put on the stand one right after another? On Friday, FBI Special Agent Daniels talked about finding Tylee's remains, while other witnesses who found or examined her and JJ's remains were on the stand a couple weeks ago. It seems like the evidence jumps from one topic to another and then back again. It would seem to make more sense for evidence to be presented in a logical or chronological order. Kathleen, that is a very observant point, and many people have said the same thing to me, that it's a little confusing, that there are... it's hard to follow, or that what you said, why don't they keep it going? There's got to be a strategy as to why they're doing it. I think that the concern could be if you spend a week with all law enforcement on the stand and you're getting technical every day and you're not having those personal witnesses, you might lose the jury. You might tune out after a while. My theory, I don't know. Also, this case is so complicated with so many moving parts that maybe they just figured we've got to do it this way. There are some days where the witnesses will come one right after the other, like the Gilberts and the aunt and or the cousin and her daughter. I mean, those kind of went side by side together, but and I think the scheduling of the witnesses, many come from out of town, many are local. I think that all plays a factor. So, but that is a keen observation. All right, I want to read this to you, and then I think we'll be done. Remember a couple of weeks ago I said, wouldn't it be amazing if we could embed with the prosecution? Like if I could have gone behind the scenes every day for off the record, shadowed the prosecutors or the defense, or both, honestly, and then when it's all over, release like a documentary. Because I'd love to know what's happening behind the scenes. Like with those sidebars with the judge, what's being said, anyone getting in trouble, what the prosecution every night when they get together, how they strategize. I mean, that stuff fascinates me. Well, a fellow journalist from Michigan wrote me and said, I'm following your coverage of the Daybell trial. You mentioned your desire to embed with the trial team to get all the inside drama. It's been done at least once before. In the Jeffrey McDonald case. Anyone know this case? McDonald was an Army doctor accused of killing his wife and 2 daughters in 1970 while they were living at Fort Bragg. He said the murders were committed by drug-crazed hippies. The case didn't go to trial until 1979, 9 years later, and McDonald and his team commissioned author Joe McGinnis to sit through the trial with them so he could write a book about the case. McGinnis had total access to McDonald, his lawyers, strategy meetings, case notes, and even lived in the same rental house with McDonald and his lawyers during the trial. Wouldn't that be amazing if I'm living with John Pryor during the trial, getting all the inside scoop? McDonald expected to be acquitted and expected the book to detail the miscarriage of justice in pursuing a case against him, but he was convicted. And McGinnis also became convicted of his guilt, despite developing a close friendship with McDonald over a several-year period. The 1983 book, Fatal Vision, was a bestseller and is definitely worth reading. Instead of exonerating McDonald, it made him out to be a narcissistic psychopath, albeit one who put on a smooth and charming front. McDonald, to no surprise, the attorney, felt betrayed and was furious about the book. He sued for breach of contract and got a settlement from the publisher's insurance company. Along the way, there was a famous essay in the New Yorker by Janet Malcolm that explored the relationship between McGinnis and McDonald to show how journalists are duplicitous snakes. I don't agree with that. Well, maybe some. The 1989 essay is also worth reading. Its first line, "Every journalist who is not too stupid or too full of himself to not notice what is going on knows that what he does is morally indefensible." McDonald is now 80, still in prison, still proclaiming his innocence. McGinnis died a few years ago of prostate cancer. From Julie Mack. Julie, thank you for sending that. It sounds like a fascinating book that I may have to read. So there you go. I'm not embedded with either side. It would be fascinating though. Other real quick questions. Georgina asks if Julie Rowe will testify. I strongly doubt that. Her name has been brought up. It could happen, but I doubt it. Michelle asks, any new candy that you like? I'm all out of candy. Where's my bag? I got to go to Winco tomorrow and get some new candy. I don't know what I'll pick up. Something good. The other day I was walking through the mall and they told me that at C's Candy, they came out and said that it was Raisin Day, World Raisin Day, and they gave me chocolate-covered raisins. Pretty good. I noticed that the witnesses are referring to Lori as Lori Vallow. Did the defense order that she should be referred to as Vallow to distance herself from Chad? That's from Debbie. Good question. That's been a John Pryor thing. He has constantly called her Lori Vallow. And Mark Means, Lori's old attorney, called her Lori Daybell and filed court paperwork to say that she was Lori Daybell. But yeah, it's Lori Vallow. Does evidence that will be presented from either side get revealed to the opponent before the trial? Yes. Or do the attorneys get surprised when evidence is presented? No, they have to have a heads up. They have to know what's coming. Have JJ and Tylee been buried yet? If so, where? They have not been buried yet, Mr. George, or Miss George. Sorry, I know it's our George. But the remains have been turned over to the family members, the next of kin. Last question. Did they ever play the rest of the 911 tape, which proved that Tammy also said gun and rifle? Yes, they played the whole thing, and then they went back. I believe they played the whole thing, and then they went back and played, they replayed it over and over, parts of it, at least John Pryor did. All right, there we go. Thank you so much for watching. Here's what you need to know. Tomorrow at 8:30, tune in Mountain Time. We're going to have that live stream up and running with all of the witnesses this week in the Chad Daybell case. We start around 8:15. Set it there on our YouTube channel or eastidahonews.com. We appreciate it. I'm also doing live written updates every day on our website if you want to read and get caught up. You can follow me every night here on Courtroom Insider, 6:30 Mountain on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you are. We also have a comprehensive video library. Here I am on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And I'll plug my family's YouTube. It's Meetin' the Eatons. Those of you watching on that channel, I thank you for watching. I thank you all for supporting eastidahonews.com. I'll be back tomorrow night. I hope you are too. Have a great rest of the weekend, and we'll see you tomorrow.